Hi, I am not Austin Goolsby, but I am Brian Deese. I'm the Deputy Director of the National Economic Council, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about payroll taxes. Now, what many of you may not know is that this year, if you're working, you are paying less in payroll taxes than you have in previous years. And what you also may not know is that in just a couple of weeks, your payroll taxes may be headed back up. So let me explain. The payroll tax is the tax that workers pay on every dollar that they earn, up to about $100,000. You can see it on your paycheck. There's a line that actually shows the payroll taxes that are taken out each pay period. Typically, a worker pays 6.2% of their paycheck, again up to about $100,000, in payroll taxes. So in 2010, a family making $50,000 paid 6.2%, or about $3,100 in payroll taxes. At the end of last year, the president worked with Congress to cut those taxes. And so he reduced this 6.2% to 4.2%. So in 2011, the typical family paid 4.2%, which again, if you're making about $50,000, that's $2,100, which means that this year that family is getting a tax cut of about $1,000. If nothing happens, that tax cut is going to go away at the end of this year because that rate that families are paying this year is scheduled to go back to 6.2%. And President Obama is focused on making sure that doesn't happen. In fact, he's proposed to even lower that rate further. So this 4.2% would get reduced to 3.1% in 2012, which means that the tax benefit that a typical family would get would increase from $1,000 to $1,500. But either way, the one thing that we can't afford is to do nothing, let the end of the year come and go, and have this $1,000 benefit disappear for typical families. Which means in 2012, the family will get nothing. So that's how the payroll tax cut works for a typical family. But how does it work for the overall economy? Well, when you give a typical family tax relief, it's not likely to just sit in their bank account. In fact, most of that tax relief gets spent on anything from groceries to a family going out and having their car repaired. When families spend money on these items, what it does is it provides increased demand, increased business for local companies. Those companies, in turn, have more money to invest in things like workers, hiring additional employees, or in making additional capital expenditures in new machines, in new ability to grow their own business. And when they hire additional workers, those workers then are able to have more money to put back into things like going out to eat at restaurants, getting their own car repaired. And so that's the cycle that helps boost our economy overall. And if you forgive me to get technical for a moment, the way that economists judge the effectiveness of a tax cut is by looking at the multiplier effect, which is a complicated way of talking about exactly this dynamic in terms of supporting the economy. And when economists look at the effectiveness of different tax cuts, and this is one example from a firm called Moody's Analytics, they show that these types of tax cuts that are aimed at cutting taxes for typical employees are among the most effective. They have the highest bang for the buck in terms of supporting the economy. They're much more effective than tax cuts that are principally aimed at wealthier Americans because wealthier Americans are less likely to go out and spend those dollars on things like gas and groceries and repairing their car. So we've talked about the way that the tax cut affects typical families and the economy. Now the question is, where do we go from here? Well, the president believes that we need to pass this tax cut in a way that's fair and has balance. One of his ideas is to pay for it by asking the wealthiest Americans, those making over $1 million a year, to pay a little bit more in taxes. Now, that would mean that about 300,000 of the wealthiest Americans in this country would pay a little more to provide 160 million Americans this kind of tax relief. It's balanced and it has a lot of support across the political spectrum outside of Washington. Unfortunately, some members of Congress are actually opposing this tax cut altogether. And some of those are the same members of Congress who've been fighting for extending tax cuts for the various wealthiest Americans for many years. And others, while they put forward legislation to extend these tax benefits, they've proposed ways of paying for it that could actually set back middle-class families in the same economic objectives we're trying to achieve by forcing cuts to things like education and medical research, and also using this as an opportunity to fight a bunch of old political battles and ideological battles about everything from environmental issues to relitigating healthcare. It really doesn't have to be that complicated. We have a tax cut that is about to expire for 160 million Americans. And we know that if we take a step to provide that tax relief in a balanced way, it'd be good for our families, it'd be good for our businesses, and it would be good for the economy overall. Thanks for watching.